My name is Lena Harper. I was 35 years old when my parents, my younger brother, and his wife drove away from a remote campsite and left me there with my 10-year-old daughter. Ruby and I had only gone for a short walk to the creek. 30 minutes earlier, 2 tents and 2 SUVs had filled the clearing. My father, Martin, had been near the fire ring. My mother, Denise, my brother Cole, his wife Taryn, and their 8-year-old son, Eli, had all been there. When Ruby and I came back, the clearing was silent. For 1 second, I thought I had taken the wrong turn. Then I recognized the creek, the blackened fire ring, and the flattened ground where the tents had stood. Tire tracks crossed the dirt, but both vehicles were gone. So was every tent. So was the cooler. So were the sleeping bags, the stove, the food, the full water containers, and the bags containing our spare clothes. We had not brought a third car. My father had insisted that traveling in fewer vehicles would keep the family together. Ruby and I had arrived as passengers, and now there was nothing in that clearing that could take us out. "Mom?" Ruby said. She was looking past me as if one of the tents might reappear if she waited long enough. I called my father's name, then my mother's, then Cole's. The forest gave me nothing back. I checked behind the trees and down the road, although I already understood that a family did not accidentally pack an entire campsite while 2 people were walking. That was when I noticed the flat stone at the edge of the cold fire ring. A sheet of paper was pinned beneath it. I knew the block handwriting before I picked it up. My father had labeled his tools and camping supplies in the same square letters for years. The note said, "This is for the best. Trust me." There was no explanation, route, or return time. They had left no shelter, food, vehicle, or way to call for help. Only an order to trust the person who had removed all of those things. Ruby moved close enough for her shoulder to press against my arm. Did Grandpa leave us? I looked at the empty road. I wanted to tell her there had been some mistake. I wanted to believe the vehicles would come around the bend before I had to answer. Instead, I said, "They left the campsite. I don't know when they're coming back." It was the most honest answer I could give her. My phone showed 61% battery and no cellular signal. Calls to my family and emergency services failed. A message to my friend Priya remained unsent, and my location would not transmit. I tried from the road and beside the creek. The basin had no usable service. Ruby watched every attempt. I stopped testing before the battery disappeared. I photographed the clearing and note, then sealed the paper inside the driest part of my day pack. The bag held supplies for an ordinary walk, not a tent, map, satellite beacon, or enough food for an emergency. It could buy us time, nothing more. I still thought my family meant to frighten me and would return once they decided I had learned their lesson. They did not return that morning. They did not return before dark. 10 days later, Ruby and I were still in the Blackpine wilderness. I learned afterward that 10 complete days had passed without Martin, Denise, Cole, or Taryn receiving a call, a message, a sighting, or any confirmation that we were alive. They still had not heard from us. By then, Ruby's ankle was injured. Our shelter was a rock overhang reinforced with 2 thin rain ponchos and 1 emergency blanket. The food from my day pack was gone. The phone that had failed to connect us to anyone was no longer usable. I measured our remaining strength through small actions. I boiled creek water. I checked Ruby's breathing. I improved the marks I had left behind. At daylight intervals, I helped her lift the plastic whistle and send 3 sharp blasts into trees that had answered us only with silence. Ruby had stopped asking when the cars would return. That frightened me more than the question had. She watched my face whenever I checked her ankle, as if she needed to know whether I still believed there was a way out. I gave her concrete truths. We had water. We had a place protected from some of the rain. We could still make noise. I did not promise that my family was coming back. I did not know whether anyone was searching the right forest or whether the people who had left us had told anyone where we were. I only knew that my daughter was weakening beside me and that I had to keep making decisions as if the next one could bring us home. Before I explain what brought my family to that clearing, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and like this video. Stories like mine force us to ask where family concern ends and control begins, especially when someone calls a dangerous choice for the best. If you believe a person's boundaries should matter even to the people closest to them, stay with me. What happened next changed everything I understood about trust. To explain why my father believed abandoning us could possibly be for our own good, I have to take you back to the weeks before that camping trip, before Blackpine Basin, before Ruby's injured ankle, and before I began counting our days by how much strength we had left. There was an envelope on my kitchen table. My house was modest and quiet. It was the place where Ruby knew which floorboard creaked outside my room and where her school photographs covered one side of the refrigerator. After my husband Adam died, that house had become more than an address to me. It was the part of Ruby's life I could keep steady when so much else had changed without warning. I worked as a scheduling supervisor for a rehabilitation network, which meant most of my days were built around details other people could not afford to lose: names, times, authorizations, and the difference between a request and a confirmed plan. At home, I approached bills and documents the same way. I read what I was being asked to accept before I agreed to it. My family called that cautious. Sometimes they called it cold. I had spent years answering those judgments with explanations because I believed clarity could prevent resentment from becoming something worse. That evening, she was doing homework at the table while I sorted the mail. She had drawn a line under every answer with the same careful concentration she used when she was trying not to make a mistake. The envelope had Cole's roofing company return address on it. I nearly set it aside. Cole had asked me to help with bookkeeping before, and I assumed he had sent another set of figures for review. I had already helped him through smaller problems. In our family, my usefulness had a way of becoming an obligation before anyone admitted they were asking. Inside was a packet from a lender. The first page identified Bell Peak Roofing. The next pages contained income summaries, debt figures, and signature lines. My name appeared under a section for a proposed guarantor. I had not agreed to guarantee anything. There was no note from Cole explaining why the lender had my information. There was no message from my parents asking whether they could pass it along. The packet had arrived as if the discussion had already happened and my signature were the only unfinished part. I turned back to the beginning and read more slowly. The requested amount was $120,000. For several seconds, I assumed Cole had sent the wrong version. Then I saw my phone number, my employer, and details specific enough to show that someone had discussed me with the lender before sending the documents. Ruby looked up from her homework. "Is something wrong?" "I don't know yet," I told her. I moved the packet away from her worksheet and continued reading. The language was formal, but the risk beneath it was simple. If Cole's business could not repay the loan, the lender wanted something stable behind his promise. I read the guarantor section twice. The blank signature line did not reassure me. It confirmed that I still had a choice, while every completed field around it suggested my family expected that choice to be yes. I reached the section describing the proposed security. My own home address was typed into the collateral description. I owned that house outright because of the worst thing that had ever happened to us. 3 years earlier, Adam had died in a workplace vehicle collision. The life insurance payment had not felt like money. It had felt like a brutal conversion, a husband and father reduced to a figure in an account. I used part of it to pay off the mortgage because I could not give Ruby her father back, but I could make certain that no missed paycheck or future emergency took her bedroom too. That was what the collateral language meant to me. It did not mean I was wealthy. It meant that if Cole's company failed, the lender could reach the one piece of stability Adam's death had allowed me to protect. I took the packet to my desk after Ruby went to bed and traced every number I could verify. Bell Peak Roofing had grown quickly. Cole had added crews, leased another truck, and taken on overhead he expected 2 large contracts to cover. Both contracts had fallen through. Business charges and personal spending had moved through the same accounts often enough that the documents no longer showed a clean line between expansion and ordinary life. The next afternoon, I called my mother first. "How much trouble is he in?" I asked. Denise went quiet, then said, "Your brother has had a difficult year. That is not an amount." What she eventually admitted was worse than the packet. She and Martin had already taken $68,000 from their retirement savings. They had also placed a secondary lien on their house. Cole still could not consolidate what he owed without stronger collateral or a guarantor whose income and assets made the lender more comfortable. That was why my information was in the file. "We weren't trying to go around you," she said. "We were trying to find out what was possible. You gave a lender my employer and my property information. Your father thought it would save time." In my family, that sentence had ended many arguments before they began. My father decided. My mother translated his decision into something gentler. Cole received the solution. I was expected to remain calm enough to make it all look reasonable. I had helped Cole before. I'd straightened out his books when he first hired employees, and I had made him 2 small loans during slow seasons. He repaid both, but months later than he had promised. Each time, Martin praised me for being the dependable one, as if dependability were a family account they could withdraw from whenever Cole ran short. My gratitude to Denise made that pattern harder to name. After Adam died, she had taken Ruby to school, sat with her through fevers, and stocked my freezer when I could barely remember to eat. I loved her for that. Part of me still believed that if I explained this boundary carefully enough, she would hear the difference between refusing Cole and protecting Ruby. The family meeting happened at my parents' dining table 2 nights later. Martin placed the packet in front of me as if returning an unfinished assignment. "The house has no mortgage," he said. "This is a guarantee, Lena. No one is asking you to hand over a key. A guarantee is exactly how the house becomes available if the business cannot pay." Cole leaned back in his chair. "You keep saying 'if' like you're hoping I fail." "I am saying the loan exists because the lender thinks failure is possible." Denise touched my wrist. "It would be temporary help. Family does that." I looked at the blank signature line and then at my father. "No, I am not putting Ruby's home behind Cole's debt." Cole pushed away from the table. Martin did not raise his voice. He rarely needed to. "After everything this family has done for you," he said, "you should think carefully before making fear your answer." I did think carefully. My answer is no. I asked whether anyone had told the lender I had already agreed. Cole said they had only presented me as an option. The distinction did not comfort me. An option is discussed before a person's employer, phone number, and property details are supplied. My family had completed every field they could complete without me, then treated the remaining consent as a family formality. For the next week, the refusal appeared in every conversation without anyone naming it directly. Denise said Cole was not sleeping. Cole sent projections showing what the company could earn if it survived the year. Martin told me that Adam would not have wanted me to shut the family out. Then he mentioned the camping reunion we had discussed months earlier. "We need time together where no one is staring at paperwork," he said. "Come with us. Let everyone remember we're a family." I wanted Ruby to have her grandparents and her cousin. I wanted one disagreement not to become the end of every relationship around it, so I agreed to the trip. I did not agree to reconsider the loan. We left Spokane Valley on August 15th in 2 SUVs. Martin drove his with Denise beside him. Cole drove the second with Taryn and Eli. Ruby and I rode with my parents on the way out, and the plan was to move seats as the children wanted. Martin had insisted that bringing fewer vehicles would save fuel and keep us together. Before leaving, I sent Priya the itinerary. She had been my friend for 6 years and understood that when I gave someone a route, an expected return date, vehicle descriptions, and family phone numbers, I was not inviting supervision. I was making sure one person outside the trip knew when our plan stopped being a plan. "Cedar Lake, back Sunday," she said when I called. "If you decide to move to a resort with room service, update me. You'll be the first to know." Ruby rolled her eyes at the day pack I placed near her feet. It held water, her prescribed rescue inhaler for mild intermittent asthma, basic first aid, and the small emergency items I carried even on short outings. My relatives sometimes teased me about packing for problems that had not happened yet. My father had taught me some of those habits when I was young. He used to say the difference between preparation and panic was whether you packed before you needed something. For the first several hours, the trip almost worked the way I had hoped. Denise passed snacks back to Ruby. Martin told an old story about Cole falling into a lake when we were children. When we stopped near Cedar Lake, Eli ran to Ruby and began telling her about the card game he had brought. Then Martin looked toward the campground entrance and said it was too crowded. "There are people everywhere," he said. "This isn't a reunion if we're listening to somebody else's generator all night." I reminded him that Cedar Lake was the location I had given Priya. "We're going to Blackpine," he said. "It's an old dispersed site. Better creek, more room, no reservation circus. Then wait while I send the change." My phone still had service when I typed the message. Martin had already pulled onto the road. The signal weakened before the message delivered, and by the time I noticed the small unsent mark, we were following Cole's SUV into a series of branching logging roads. "How much farther?" I asked. "Not far." It was roughly 23 road miles. The forest changed by degrees. Pavement became gravel. Maintained gravel narrowed into older roads with grass pushing through the center. At each junction, Martin chose a branch without stopping. Dusk settled between the trees, and turns that might have looked distinct in daylight became variations of the same dark timber and pale road dust. I checked my phone twice. There was no signal to send Priya the correction. Martin said reception improved closer to the ridge and that I was treating a camping trip like a military exercise. "I'm treating a changed itinerary like a changed itinerary," I said. Denise turned in her seat. "Your father knows this area." That was true. I let the fact do more work than it should have. We reached Blackpine near dusk. The site was a bare clearing beside a cold creek with 2 logging spurs meeting near its edge. There were no numbered spaces, signs, toilets, ranger boxes, or permanent shelter. But while the campsite was intact, the isolation felt manageable. We had 2 tents, sleeping bags, a stove, a full cooler, food bins, water containers, and 2 working vehicles. Martin directed where everything went. He chose the tent sites, corrected Cole's fire ring, and showed Eli where the creek bank became slippery. His competence was familiar enough to feel like safety. Ruby and Eli spent that evening collecting pine cones and arguing about the rules of their card game. Ruby became particularly polite whenever Martin corrected them. She had learned to monitor the room around him, just as I had. Denise kept conversation moving whenever silence approached the lone. Taryn checked her phone even though none of us had service, then asked Cole in a low voice whether a payment had cleared before we left. The intact camp made us look like a family with ordinary tensions. On August 16th, the paperwork returned. Cole brought it up after dinner while Ruby and Eli were filling cups at the water container. He said the lender's deadline was close and accused me of refusing before I understood the new projections. "I understand the part that matters," I said. "If the company cannot pay, my home secures the promise." Martin rested both hands on his knees. "You're talking as if Cole is a stranger asking you to gamble." "I am talking about a legal document, not whether I love him. Those things are not separate in a family." Denise said, "No one wants Ruby to lose anything. This is how we make sure nobody does." Taryn had been silent until then. She looked toward Eli and said, "If the business goes under, this affects him too." I understood her fear. That did not give me the right to transfer it to my daughter. "I am sorry you're in this position," I told her, "but I am not signing." Cole stood so quickly that his chair scraped the ground. You always get to be the responsible one because everyone else pays the price. Cole, Denise warned softly. Martin looked at me for several seconds. His voice stayed level. Sometimes people need to experience what happens when they stop acting like part of a family. At the time, I heard it as another judgment. I did not hear a plan. The conversation ended, but the calm that followed was staged. Cole drank by the fire without speaking to me. Taryn folded and refolded a dish towel. Denise asked Ruby about school with exaggerated brightness. Martin moved around the campsite, checking knots and supplies as if correct placement could restore his authority. By the next morning, everyone was behaving almost normally. Denise made oatmeal. Eli asked Ruby to walk down to the creek with him, but Taryn told him to help clean breakfast dishes. Ruby asked if she and I could go instead. The creek was close. We would be gone about 30 minutes. I picked up my day pack, told the adults where we were going, and left with my daughter. It was approximately 8:40 on the morning of August 17th. Ruby carried her smaller water bottle. I had the larger stainless steel one in the pack with the food and emergency items. The walk was not an attempt to escape an argument or prove a point. We followed the creek for a few minutes, stopped where sunlight reached the water, and watched tiny fish hold themselves against the current. "Uncle Cole is mad at you," Ruby said. "He is upset about an adult decision." "Did you do something bad?" "No." I crouched so we were level. "And it is not your job to make adults less upset by agreeing with them." She nodded, although I could see she was storing the answer rather than trusting it yet. We shared a little water and turned back. I remember checking the time because I wanted to be in camp before anyone could describe a short walk as another act of disrespect. We returned at about 9:20. The erased clearing, the folded note, and the dead phone were already part of the story, you know. What mattered next was that shock could not be allowed to choose for me. After protecting the note and photographs, I walked to the point where the road divided. The tire impressions showed both vehicles had left, but multiple old tracks crossed the dirt. I called until my throat hurt once, then stopped wasting strength. I listened for engines. Nothing approached. I emptied the day pack beside the fire ring and counted what the family had not taken because it had been on my back. The supplies were limited, but they created decisions. The 1.2-liter bottle was uncoated steel, which meant I could heat water in it. Ruby still had her bottle. We had 4 granola bars, her rescue inhaler, first aid, the 2 ponchos, the Mylar blanket, 12 waterproof matches, the headlamp, whistle, knife, and phone. Our light jackets were the only warm clothing we wore. There was no map. The creek gave us water, but not safe water without treatment. The campsite gave searchers a last known place, but I did not know whether anyone had been told we were missing. The road might lead out, but I did not remember the sequence of turns well enough to gamble with daylight and a 10-year-old beside me. Martin had taught me that when people know where you were last seen, your first job is to stay findable. I hated using his lesson inside the danger he had created, but the lesson remained sound. "Are we walking home?" Ruby asked. "Not today. We are staying where they know we were." "What if they don't come back?" "Then we make sure we have water, cover, and a signal. One thing at a time." I did not tell her that home was roughly 3 hours away by vehicle or that the nearest staffed place was somewhere beyond roads I could not reconstruct. Ruby needed accurate information, not the whole size of my fear. We began with water. I filled the steel bottle at the creek, set it near a small fire, and boiled 1 batch at a time. Each batch was less than we wanted and took longer than I liked. We let it cool and transferred what we could. The process made clean water possible. It did not make it plentiful. I gave Ruby half a granola bar and ate less than half of my own. She noticed. "You need the same," she said. "I need enough. So do you." I asked her to gather dry twigs from the immediate clearing while I kept her in sight. Giving her a task slowed the questions without requiring her to pretend she was unafraid. I cut cord from a poncho edge as little as possible, angled both ponchos against a low natural screen, and kept the Mylar blanket folded until the temperature dropped. The pack was not a rescue system. It was a way to buy hours without spending all our options at once. I put my phone in airplane mode and checked for service only at planned intervals. I used it to record the time and to confirm that the photographs and unsent message remained stored. At each check, the result was the same. Ruby's breathing stayed steady. I kept her inhaler dry and within reach. She did not have an asthma attack, and I did not invent one in my mind every time she took a deeper breath. We had enough real dangers. Through the afternoon, I kept expecting to hear Martin's SUV. At noon, I imagined he had decided 2 hours were sufficient. By mid-afternoon, I imagined an argument had delayed them. Near dark, I began to understand that each explanation I created protected them from a fact Ruby and I were already living. The temperature dropped quickly after sunset. I wrapped the mylar blanket around Ruby beneath one poncho and pressed close enough to share warmth. The small fire gave us a narrow circle of heat. I did not build it larger because we had 11 matches left and no certainty about how long they would need to last. Every few minutes, light between the trees looked like headlights. Every time it was the headlamp reflecting from wet leaves or my eyes turning darkness into what I wanted. Ruby whispered, "Did they leave because I went with you?" No. Maybe they thought I stayed. They watched us leave together. Every adult there knew you were with me. Saying it aloud removed one more place for denial to hide. "Are you scared?" she asked. "Yes, and I know what we do until morning." I checked her hands, kept her off the coldest ground, and told her exactly when I would add wood or heat more water. I did not promise that the vehicles would return. I promised I would still be beside her when she opened her eyes. No headlights came. At first light, the road was as empty as it had been the night before, and I stopped planning for a family performance that would end on its own. I called the next full stretch of daylight Day 1, not because the hours before it did not count, but because naming the days gave Ruby and me a structure the family could not remove. We stayed near the clearing. I rebuilt the shelter so it shed wind more effectively, boiled more creek water, and placed pale sticks in an arrow pointing toward our fire ring. I tied a strip from the least useful edge of one poncho where it could move in the air without costing us our main cover. We split another bar. Ruby watched the road while she ate. "If Grandpa comes back, what are you going to say?" I had imagined speeches through the night. By morning, none mattered as much as leaving safely. "I am going to get you into the vehicle, then we are going home." The phone still showed partial power because I barely used it. Every scheduled signal check failed. I drafted a message with our status and the name Blackpine in case it found a connection, but it remained beside the message I had tried to send Priya on the drive in. Remaining there for more than 24 hours was not helplessness. It was the most defensible choice, while I believed our last location might be known. By the end of that day, however, the meaning changed. Anyone who intended to come back knew we had no shelter or vehicle. Anyone who had reported us would have directed help to the clearing. No one came. On day 2, finite food and silence made indefinite waiting its own risk. I chose the logging spur that appeared to slope out of the basin. Fresh tire marks existed in both directions because the SUVs had maneuvered near the junction and older tracks braided through them. We had arrived in poor light after too many turns. I remembered Martin bearing left at one point, but I could not tell whether I was remembering the last junction or one of 6 before it. I packed the note, photographs, remaining bars, water, and every emergency item. Then I made a marker at the campsite and another where we entered the spur. "We are not racing," I told Ruby. "We stop before we're exhausted, and we mark every change." The road looked promising at first. It widened and rose gently. For several hours, moving gave us a sense of progress that waiting had denied us. I checked for signal from the higher bends, turning airplane mode off only long enough to see the same empty bars. Then the spur narrowed. Grass thickened through the center. Alders leaned into the road. Instead of climbing toward a ridge or joining a maintained route, it curled deeper along the drainage. I did not know immediately that it was the wrong road. I knew only that continuing without a clear destination would spend more water and strength than we could replace. We stopped near the creek before dusk and used the markers we had left to preserve a way back. Ruby did not accuse me. That made my own self-accusation louder. "You picked the best one you could," she said. She had heard me use that sentence with her over small mistakes. Hearing it returned by my child nearly broke my composure. "I picked with the information I had," I said. "Now we use the new information." Rain began overnight and strengthened on day 3. It blurred the tire impressions and darkened the pieces of wood I had exposed for contrast. The road surface became slick. I shortened our steps and kept Ruby on the inner side of the cut, but one section of wet soil shifted under her shoe. She slid, caught herself, and twisted her left ankle beneath her. Her cry was sharp and immediate. I was beside her before she tried to stand. The ankle swelled along the outside, but it was not visibly deformed. She could move her toes, feel my touch, and put a little weight on it only with significant pain. With the first aid supplies, I supported it as well as I could, but I was not a wilderness medic, and I did not pretend a wrap turned an injury into mobility. "I'm sorry," Ruby kept saying. "I'm sorry, I should have watched." The ground moved. "Now I'm making us stay." I held her face between my hands. "You are not making any of this happen. Your ankle is hurt. The adults who left us made the danger. Those are different facts." We could no longer cover ground at a meaningful pace without worsening the sprain. I helped her to a rock overhang near the creek, a shallow protection that blocked some rain and wind. We reinforced it with the ponchos and placed the bright side of the mylar blanket inward around Ruby's body. That was the midpoint of our survival, although I did not have that word for it then. Until the injury, part of me believed I could correct the family's choice by walking Ruby out. Afterward, my objective became smaller and more absolute. Keep her warm, keep her hydrated, keep the ankle stable, and make our location detectable. The cold rain continued into day 4. Our light jackets were damp. The temperature remained survivable, but survivable was not the same as safe when a child was wet, underfed, and unable to move enough to generate heat. I used the matches one at a time and protected the flame with my body until the driest inner twigs caught. We had already consumed the 4 granola bars across the first 3 days. Hunger settled into weakness rather than dramatic pain. I boiled water in small batches and monitored Ruby's breathing. Cold and fear made her take quick breaths once, so I guided her to slow them and kept the rescue inhaler ready. Her asthma remained controlled. That small mercy mattered. I attached the whistle where Ruby could reach it. 3 blasts, I told her. Then we listen. We do it at regular times while there is daylight. She blew 3 times. The sound was painfully thin against the forest, but it traveled farther than our voices. We listened. Nothing answered. My breaking point came later, not as screaming or collapse, but while trying to warm my hands enough to retie the shelter, my fingers would not cooperate. Ruby sat wrapped in silver material, her injured foot elevated on my pack, watching me conceal how badly I was shaking. For days, I had kept a narrow space open for an explanation that would make my family less dangerous. Perhaps they believed the road was simple. Perhaps they believed we had more equipment. Perhaps they intended to report us after the lesson lasted long enough. None of those explanations changed the decisions. They knew Ruby was with me. They removed her dry clothes, sleeping bag, food, and transportation. They left an unmarked basin after the last reliable signal. They did not return through 4 nights of cold. Whether Martin called that discipline, family loyalty, or something done for my benefit no longer mattered to survival. I stopped trying to locate innocence inside their intention. I used my remaining strength on things that could still help us: clearer markers, regular signals, protected water, the safest shelter available, and truthful answers when Ruby was afraid. On day 5, my phone became unusable. I had protected it from direct rain, but cold moisture had worked into everything we carried. When I checked it that morning, the screen flashed, showed the unsent messages for a moment, and went black. I could not bring it back. Until then, the phone had been a failed possibility. Afterward, it was only a sealed record I needed to preserve. I kept it in the driest part of the pack with Martin's note and concentrated on the whistle schedule. My own voice had grown rough. Small abrasions on my hands and lower legs were red and painful, and standing too quickly made the overhang tilt around me. What I did not know was that Priya had begun doing exactly what I asked an itinerary contact to do. I learned from her, and later confirmed in the incident records, that she called when our expected return passed. Then I missed work. Priya knew I might extend my own plans, but she knew I would not keep Ruby out without updating anyone, miss a shift without notice, and ignore every call at once. On day 5, she reported both of us missing. She gave authorities Cedar Lake Campground, our expected travel route, descriptions of Martin's and Cole's SUVs, and every family number I had sent her. The information was accurate when I gave it to her. Martin's change after the last signal was what made it wrong. Investigators contacted my family. According to the recorded interview summary I read later, Martin told them I had become angry during the trip and changed my plans. He implied that I had chosen to separate from the family and might be avoiding contact to prove a point. He did not say Blackpine Basin. He did not tell them he had driven us 23 miles beyond Cedar Lake or removed our transportation. The first organized effort, therefore, focused on Cedar Lake and the routes surrounding the itinerary. Searchers were not failing to care. They were being denied the one fact that could place them in the right forest. During days 6 and 7, Ruby and I found a small patch of late-season huckleberries near the creek. I recognized them from trips with my father, checked each one, and gave Ruby most of what we gathered. They were food, but not enough food. A handful changed the taste in our mouths. It did not restore the calories we had lost. We improved our overhead signal instead. I arranged pale fallen branches in a shape too deliberate to be natural and secured the bright side of one poncho where it could be seen through a break in the canopy. Because of Ruby's ankle, we made only short efforts toward a nearby clearing, always staying within a distance I could help her return. Ruby took control of the whistle routine. "Is it time?" she would ask. I checked by the available light after losing the phone clock. Morning, midday, and later afternoon were close enough. She blew 3 blasts, rested, then listened. Once she asked, "What if they hear me and think I'm annoying? People searching for you want you to make noise. Grandpa doesn't. Grandpa is not the rule for every adult." That distinction became part of keeping her alive. I would not let the same obedience that made Ruby easy to control make her quiet when sound was our best chance. She still cried. She still asked whether I would wake up when we slept. She was not transformed into a brave little partner who carried me through the woods. She was 10. Her useful task belonged to her. The responsibility remained mine. By days 8 and 9, the search had widened, but in the wrong geography. The logs later showed teams checking trailheads, roads, and shore areas around Cedar Lake. Investigators requested preservation of vehicle and phone location data as the family's account stopped matching Priya's description of my habits. Taryn's later statement and the preserved messages explained what happened inside the family during those days. Martin kept insisting I was choosing silence to punish them. Cole told Taryn that changing their account would destroy the business, expose everyone, and take Eli's home. He pressured her to repeat that we had left after an argument. I did not know any of that beneath the overhang. All I could see was that no engine had followed my markers and no voice answered the whistle. My body had begun conserving itself without permission. I moved slowly. I sometimes forgot what I had stood to retrieve. Ruby's face looked narrower. The skin around her heel and ankle suffered from dampness and the improvised support, even though I adjusted it. The fear that no one was searching became more convincing than hope. On day 10, we changed the signal again because I could no longer make repeated trips to the clearing. I placed the brightest remaining material higher near the drainage. and used a line of broken branches to connect the spur to our shelter. It was not dramatic. It was a trail of small decisions made by someone running out of large ones. 10 complete days had passed without a call, message, sighting, or verified contact from either of us reaching my family. Later, Taryn told investigators that Eli asked about Ruby throughout that period. The adults had told him I chose to stay behind. By day 10, he was asking why Ruby had not called him and whether she had her own tent. His concern did not make him responsible for what his mother did next. It removed one more excuse Taryn had been using to believe the story Cole and Martin wanted. Late that evening, Taryn went to investigators. The official record and her statement showed that she gave them the Blackpine route, identified the dispersed campsite, and produced coordinates from Cole's vehicle history. She surrendered her phone with the family message thread and gave a complete account of the packing, departure, and 10 days of concealment. She admitted that she had packed bedding and Ruby's spare clothes. She admitted that she had watched Martin leave the note. She admitted that she entered Cole's SUV knowing Ruby was away with me and that the clearing had been stripped. The disclosure did not make her innocent. It made accurate rescue possible. While Ruby and I slept in fragments without knowing anything had changed, teams were redirected from Cedar Lake. Search personnel, sheriff's investigators, and federal land staff used Taryn's coordinates and route description to mobilize toward Blackpine. For the first time since our walk, someone outside the family was traveling toward the place where we actually were. At first light on day 11, search vehicles reached the Blackpine campsite. I learned the sequence afterward from the search report. Teams found the cold clearing and confirmed impressions consistent with 2 SUVs. They found the marker I had built near the fire ring and the direction indicators leading onto the spur Ruby and I had taken. Those markers could not tell them we had chosen the wrong road. They did not need to. They told trained searchers where 2 missing people had moved. Ground teams followed the spur and the smaller signs I had left wherever it split or narrowed. Searchers reached the section disturbed by the rain and then entered the drainage based on the branch line and bright material we had raised near the creek. Ruby and I knew none of this. That morning, she had difficulty keeping warm despite the temperature rising. I heated another small bottle of water and checked her toes beneath the wrap. I tried to call during 1 whistle interval, but my voice would not carry. "You do it," I told her. Ruby lifted the plastic whistle. 3 blasts. We listened. For a few seconds, the forest held the sound the way it had every other day. Then something answered. 3 blasts, farther away and lower in tone. Ruby looked at me without moving. Hope had disappointed her too many times for immediate celebration. "Again," I said. She blew 3 more. The answer came closer. I remember trying to stand and having my legs fail beneath me. I remember Ruby shouting even though I had told her not to waste her voice. I remember human voices calling that they were search and rescue, and the terror that rose with relief because strangers were about to take control of our bodies when Ruby and I had survived by staying together. The team reached us that afternoon. No one gave a victory speech. A responder knelt where Ruby could see his hands and told her his name, then asked before touching her ankle. Another placed warm layers around me and gave us controlled amounts of fluid while assessing what transport we could tolerate. They explained each separation of inches as they moved us from the overhang. I kept asking whether Ruby was coming with me. "She's coming," someone answered each time. Ruby kept the whistle clenched in one hand until a medic asked to secure it to the pack. The first reliable promise from an adult in 11 days was not that everything would be fine. It was a specific statement about what would happen next, followed by exactly that action. At the hospital, our injuries were serious but treatable. Ruby had dehydration, caloric depletion, mild hypothermia, skin breakdown, and the stable ankle sprain. Her asthma had remained controlled because the inhaler stayed with us. She spent 4 nights in the hospital. I had dehydration, significant caloric depletion, cold exposure, infected abrasions, and acute kidney stress that doctors expected to reverse with treatment. I spent 5 nights there. Treatment corrected the immediate danger before it corrected how danger felt. Fluids improved my kidney function, antibiotics addressed the infected abrasions, and monitored nutrition began replacing what my body had consumed. Yet I still woke, reaching for the pack because I believed the note and phone had been left in the forest. If a door closed beyond my line of sight, I asked where Ruby was. Ruby reacted differently. She saved food from her trays even after nurses explained that more would come. She watched staff remove equipment from the room and asked whether they were taking it away permanently. When someone needed to move her for an examination, she wanted the destination and return time first. The staff answered her questions directly. They did not call her difficult or tell her to be brave. They showed us that care could include information before action, something our family had demanded we live without. The doctors confirmed that neither of us had permanent organ damage. Neither of us walked out of the hospital restored by that fact. Priya came as soon as staff allowed. She did not rush at Ruby or ask us to recount the worst moments. She sat beside my bed and said, "I reported you. I kept telling them Cedar Lake did not explain you disappearing." I stared at her. Medication and exhaustion made information arrive slowly. "They knew it wasn't Cedar Lake," I said. "Your family knew?" she answered. Searchers did not. That was the first clear piece of what happened outside the wilderness. After I was medically stable, an investigator explained the rest in stages. Martin, Denise, Cole, and Taryn had all returned to Spokane Valley. None reported us. When Priya forced the absence into official view on day 5, my family described it as a voluntary separation and withheld Blackpine. The investigator also told me that Taryn had eventually provided the true site. I could hold both facts at once. Her disclosure helped searchers reach us. Her silence helped keep them away for 10 days. Temporary protective no-contact measures were put in place before we left the hospital. Staff did not bring my parents to my room, deliver their letters to Ruby, or ask us to hear explanations in the name of family healing. The note remained in evidence. My phone, when specialists dried and examined it, still held the time-stamped photographs and unsent location update. I had spent the wilderness wondering whether my family understood the danger. The first verified records showed something harder. They understood enough to protect themselves from it, while Ruby and I were still inside it. The case did not depend on one dramatic confession. It formed through records that reinforced one another until the family's language could no longer contain what they had done. The paper under the stone matched a torn page from Martin's camp ledger, and the handwriting matched years of ordinary labels and notes. My photographs placed it in the stripped clearing at the time Ruby and I returned. The unsent update on my phone showed that I had tried to transmit the changed location rather than disappear voluntarily. Priya's saved itinerary showed why the first search went to Cedar Lake. Location histories from both SUVs traced the drive into Blackpine and the departure on August 17th. Tire impressions and the condition of the clearing matched that movement. Investigators recovered the tents, cooler, stove, food containers, sleeping gear, and Ruby's spare clothing from the places the family had taken them. The search chronology measured the consequence of the lie. The medical records measured the danger it created. The family message thread established the part I had not witnessed. Martin and Cole discussed removing the equipment so I could not remain comfortably at the site. The intended effect was pressure. I was supposed to walk out frightened, understand that I needed family, and become willing to sign. Martin had chosen the site, written the note, directed the packing, and driven the lead vehicle away. Cole had pushed everyone to leave before we could return. He loaded the cooler and remaining water and later pressured Taryn to preserve the false account because the truth threatened his business and freedom. Denise's messages showed concern about how severe the plan was. Her actions showed what she chose after recognizing that concern. She helped remove the camp, saw Ruby's supplies being loaded, left in Martin's SUV, repeated the false account, and deleted worried messages instead of alerting anyone. Taryn packed bedding and clothes, entered Cole's vehicle, and remained silent for 10 days. Her phone and statement supplied evidence against the others, but they also supplied evidence against her. Martin continued calling the abandonment a lesson. Cole argued that they expected us to reach a road within a day. Neither claim answered why people who believed that assumption refused to give searchers the location when no call came. That was where their explanation failed. Good intentions did not remove the tents. A misunderstanding did not load two vehicles. A short lesson did not require 10 days of concealment after a child vanished. The cases resolved through separate pleas rather than a theatrical trial. Martin received the most serious treatment for planning the act, changing the location, ordering the removal, and directing the later deception. He received a custodial sentence and long-term protective restrictions. Cole also received a custodial sentence for his active planning, removal of essential supplies, financial motive, and role in prolonging the lie. Denise received a lesser conviction with supervised probation and community obligations. Her remorse was acknowledged as remorse. It was not treated as proof that Ruby would be safe with her. Taryn's complete cooperation materially reduced her consequence. She received a non-custodial sentence with supervision and service requirements. The reduction recognized the lives her disclosure helped save. It did not erase the days she chose not to make it. Taryn separated from Cole. From what the formal updates showed, she built a household for Eli outside the Bell hierarchy. I was relieved for him. I did not make that relief into a relationship with her, and she did not ask me to tell Ruby that disclosure had canceled participation. The temporary protective restrictions became durable no-contact boundaries. Martin, Denise, and Cole had no access to me, Ruby, our home, or our money. I did not meet them privately for closure. Ruby did not receive apologies she had not requested. The financial consequences followed the decisions already in motion. I never signed the $120,000 guarantee, and the lender withdrew the offer. Bell Peak Roofing entered insolvency because its debts and lost contracts existed before the wilderness. Martin and Denise sold their house to address the secondary lien and the retirement losses they had already accepted for Cole. I did not cause those outcomes by refusing. I also did not rescue them from the outcomes by changing my refusal after they became painful. There were days when grief made that clarity feel cruel. Denise had once sat beside Ruby through a fever. Martin had taught me how to keep matches dry. Cole had been the little brother who waited outside my bedroom after nightmares. Those memories remained true. They did not overrule what each person chose when Ruby's life depended on them. My house remained mine. At first, returning to it did not feel like victory. I checked the driveway repeatedly. Ruby followed me from room to room, but her bed was where we had left it. Her school photographs were still on the refrigerator. The address my family had placed in a collateral box remained the place where my daughter and I could recover without owing our safety to them. My refusal had not destroyed the family. It had revealed which people believed my belonging depended on surrendering it. Recovery was not a verdict delivered with the pleas. For weeks, Ruby hid food in her room. She woke from nightmares and came looking for me, then panicked if I stepped outside without saying exactly where I was going. The sound of a car starting could make her run to a window. At school, she worried that I would not be there at pickup even when I had never been late. I had my own versions of the same fear. I slept lightly. I counted supplies in ordinary rooms. I felt an urge to keep Ruby within sight, even when she was safe with someone we both trusted. The phrase, "trust me," could tighten my chest before I consciously heard the words. We both received trauma-focused therapy. I took protected leave and returned to work gradually, first for shortened days and then for a fuller schedule. Ruby returned to school in stages with a plan that let her check in without being punished for needing reassurance. No clinician called her food hiding bad behavior. No one called my vigilance ingratitude. We learned the difference between a response that had protected us once and a preparation that supported the life we wanted now. Priya helped in ways that did not turn help into authority. She arrived when she said she would. If plans changed, she told Ruby directly. She never drove away from our house with Ruby's belongings as a joke, and she never asked us to prove trust by surrendering information. Letters came through legal channels. Ruby was not required to read them. She was not asked to accept an apology, attend a visit, or participate in a restorative meeting so adults could feel forgiven. When she said no, I did not explain her answer until it sounded softer. Almost a year after the abandonment, Ruby asked whether we could camp again. I made sure the question belonged to her rather than to an idea of recovery. We talked about what would make the trip feel safe. She wanted Priya with us. She wanted a campground near a maintained trail. She wanted to know where every vehicle key would be. So 1 year after Blackpine, the three of us stood at the beginning of a short marked daylight trail. We had filed our route and return time with the campground contact and with another person at home. Our packs held adequate food, water, dry layers, first aid, and communication equipment. A registered personal locator beacon was clipped where I could reach it. I checked it once, then stopped. Preparation had done its job. I did not need to turn it into a ritual Ruby had to manage. At the trail register, I wrote my name. Then I handed Ruby the pencil. She wrote Lena Harper on the first line because she wanted to make my letters darker. Beneath it, she wrote Ruby Harper. In the final space, she added the time we planned to return. Priya waited beside us without hurrying. The entry was a small piece of public information. 2 names, 1 route, 1 return time. To me, it was the opposite of Martin's last-minute turn beyond the signal. No one had changed the destination without consent. Someone outside the trail knew where we were. If we failed to return, the people who had that information would act. We completed the trail slowly. Ruby chose the pace. Her ankle had healed, but we stopped once for water, and once because she wanted to listen to the creek without moving. Nothing about the walk proved the wilderness had become harmless. It proved that danger did not have to be disguised, and trust did not require blindness. We returned before the time written in the register. Back at camp, our vehicle stood where we had parked it. Priya set water on the table while Ruby and I checked the tent we had erected together that morning. The stakes were firm. Our sleeping bags and dry clothes were inside. The food and keys were exactly where all 3 of us knew they would be. Ruby lifted the flap. She looked back at me, not for permission to ignore fear, but to confirm the plan we had made together. I nodded, and she stepped into the tent we had built ourselves, knowing no vehicle would disappear without her and no adult required silence as the price of belonging.